as the interparliamentary.
Hello and welcome. I'm Asima Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Japan's Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi has secured a decisive snap election victory, with her LDP alliance taking 352 of 465 seats. She now faces challenges on debt, inflation, and defense policies. Hong Kong court has sentenced pro-democracy media tycoon Jimmy Lai to 20 years in prison for foreign collusion and sedition. Rights groups say the ruling marks another blow to Hong Kong's freedoms. Thailand's Conservative Prime Minister Anutin Charnvirakul has declared victory after TV projections showed his party winning the most parliamentary seats by a wide margin. Anutin said the result belonged to all Thais regardless of how they voted. U.S. envoy to Syria Tom Barak held a phone call with Kurdistan Democratic Party President Masoud Barzani to discuss Syria and regional politics, with both sides stressing the need to prevent escalation and work towards lasting stability. This is seen as a key step towards Syria's unity and restoring state authority. Syria's Foreign Minister Assad Hassan al-Shaibani and Intelligence Chief Hussein al-Salama are in Riyadh to participate in talks at the Global Coalition to defeat ISIS. They were hosted by Saudi Deputy Foreign Minister Walid bin Abdul Karim al-Khuraiji, marking a high-level security meeting hosted by Saudi Arabia. Two South Korean Army crew members were killed after an AH-1S Cobra attack helicopter crashed during a training flight shortly after 11 a.m. local time. Now the military has suspended all AH-1S operations and launched an emergency investigation into the cause of the crash, which remains unknown for now. Venezuelan opposition figure Juan Pablo Guanipa, a close ally of Maria Corina Machado, was kidnapped in Caracas shortly after his release from prison yesterday. Guanipa had been detained for more than 8 months on politically motivated charges and was released, with his abduction raising new concerns. SpaceX Crew 12 astronauts reached Cape Canaveral ahead of their ISS launch, calling the mission very real and a symbol of international cooperation. Now for this hour, we start with UK. Prime Minister Keir Starmer faces fresh political turmoil as his Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, resigns over Lord Mandelson's controversial appointment as British Ambassador to the US. McSweeney, who masterminded Starmer's leadership and election campaigns, took full responsibility for advising the Prime Minister despite not overseeing vetting. Mandelson had ties to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, sparking outrage. The resignation comes amid wider fallout from nearly 3 million pages of U.S. Justice Department documents, which have led to over 15 high-profile resignations in 10 countries and investigations into more than 80 prominent figures. The files reveal involvement of politicians, diplomats, billionaires, and corporate leaders in sexual exploitation, prompting police reviews and government inquiries across Europe and beyond. Meanwhile, Mona Juul, Norway's ambassador to Jordan and Iraq, has been exempt from duties while the foreign ministry investigates her alleged links to Jeffrey Epstein. Juul says her interactions were private and tied to her spouse, but Norway's Liberal Party leader has called for her resignation. Now we welcome Ms. Shruti Dasgupta. She's an international affairs analyst, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Ms. Dasgupta, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at, so many names that have shown to have connections with Jeffrey Epstein through this latest release of the Epstein files, what do you think would be called for, looking at the resignation of this Prime Minister's aide and also some high-level ministers' resignations in France and Norway? Do you think this is also enough for the justice?
Greetings, Asuma. That's a very important and poignant question that you've put to me.
Thank you.
Epstein files was weaponized in almost all elections between Trump and the Democrats. Now, when with the 3 million dump coming our way, we are under the deluge of over information, and we're trying to sort things out while trying to protect victim identity, and the redactions are scanty, and there's a whole lot of mess that is being cleaned up in the files themselves. What we've seen is a direct difference in between how USA is reacting to the release of files as compared to how the Europeans are. Even a mere mention, a slight hint of exchange of favors leads to politicians losing their seat and an investigation being launched. Whereas Trump himself excuses himself from any political wrongdoing. We do not know whether redacted files or withheld files in his name would probably hold. We do not, Lutnick excuses himself from any sort of responsibility. So at least there is a semblance of justice, though not complete. At least there is a semblance of justice when the European leaders are held to the moral and ethical grounds we expect world leaders to have. This, of course, shakes a whole lot of power seats across Europe and the Western Hemisphere as such. But what I observe is that I do not know whether it is going to lead to a conviction. It might lead to a few resignation, reinstatements, or maybe a step back from politics, but it would not necessarily lead to a conviction. In Mandelson's case, I'm sure there is going to be something deeper because there was a direct exchange of money that was traced. And even in the Norway incident, we know that there was exchange of favors to a level where 5 million each was left to the children of that person involved, as well as mafia sort of tactics in which a person has come forth and saying that the lady had helped, had taken help from Epstein and securing a house in almost like a mafia-like term, because in terms of bringing down the cost of the house, like basically forced selling. So I'm hoping for a conviction on those grounds at least, but not the people who were actually partying, were they? There were many others that were partying, many of them that have not faced the full brunt of law. So there is no real equality or justice for the victims that is there. There is only a hope that at least people who benefited by their exchange of favors, exchange of money, money laundering, or whatever other rigs that Epstein was running, apart from the sex trafficking and flesh trade and other heinous crimes that he was involved in, at least there is a semblance that those who benefited monetarily will have to answer for it. Those who just indulged in the debauchery of it are still out and loose, and US politicians have kind of grouped up together from me because both Democrats and Republicans, as well as private citizens, the rich ones, are implicated, and all of them seem to have formed a clique and are supporting each other and saying there was no wrongdoing. So probably Epstein just did really truly commit suicide, and he was not really a child sex trafficker. He was not really a heinous person, because if these people aren't, then what they had against him in terms of law should also be negated.
How do you think this all the reveals and connections and the revelation, including these connections, and also like you rightfully mentioned, it's we can only hope for justice, but we don't exactly know what would that look like and how long would that take. So do you think this whole thing is shifting the perceptions of public towards political elites, and also the trust that people had towards these people?
Well, any logical citizen sitting on the other side of a screen watching the Epstein files unfold its ugly face would definitely feel cheated, that irrespective of which party they chose, irrespective of which leader they find worthy of their admiration, they somehow seem to have some connection leading to Epstein. So basically the power circles of the elite is very dirty, very unhinged, almost, and the common people find themselves at loss because they are unable to see the rules and regulations that are applicable to them as citizens of their nations does not seem to be equally applicable to these people who are in the center of power. So privilege and power seem to be overshadowing the entire justice system, and that is the only thing that we can say that has come to fore after the release of the 3 million documents. It has not shown that justice will be served. It is only a hope that maybe somebody would give justice at some point of time. The only justice that is actually happening is out there in social media, where naming and naming people, pinning them on the board by calling their association with Epstein out publicly. That is the only justice that is happening out there, not through the judicial systems, definitely not in USA. Just a small sliver of hope in the European system, but we, as you've just rightly mentioned, that it does not, there is no guarantee that just because an investigation has been started in the name of their connections to Epstein, they will actually lead to a conviction. Maybe a stepping back from politics, but that is the best we can hope for as of now. And in USA, not even that. So basically, victims were used, abused, and justice has completely crumbled in this particular case.
Yes. With that, I'd like to thank Ms. Dasgupta for sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Italy. Italy has officially refused to join US President Donald Trump's controversial Board of Peace, citing a constitutional limit. Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani has said that Italy cannot join any organization unless it enjoys equality with other states, which is blocked by Trump's veto powers over the board's charter. Italy joins France, Germany, and the UK in declining the self-styled international peace body, which has faced criticism for bypassing the United Nations. Tajani has added Italy is still willing to support Gaza through training police, despite not joining the board. The first board meeting is scheduled in Washington on February 19th, with Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban confirming the attendance. Now we welcome Yeshaya Rosenman. He's an Israeli journalist, joins us live from Jerusalem. Thank you very much, Mr. Rosenman, for joining us. Welcome to NewsX World. Now, looking at this, what do you think, what strategic considerations may have led these countries like Italy, France, to reject participation in the Board of Peace? And also, how does this refusal affect the credibility or legitimacy of President Trump's Board of Peace?
Good morning. I'm not really sure about the internal politics. Italy cited constitutional difficulties. I don't know whether that is really the case. But I think part of the issue is that these countries are trying to maintain their own hegemony. There is a thought that the Board of Peace is an attempt to replace the UN and the UN Security Council as the defining body for international affairs. Countries like France, of course, and England have a seat on the permanent seat on the Security Council. So I think there is fear. One fear is that they are losing their grip on the institutions that already exist, the UN institutions, which President Trump views as deeply corrupted and dysfunctional.
Right. So what specific provisions in Italy's constitution, if you can share, which prevented them from joining this international?
I don't know. I'm not an expert on Italian constitutional law. I can only quote what I saw in the newspapers, that they would not join a body led by an international body in which all the nations would not be equal. It would be led by one single nation. They could not subordinate themselves. I don't know if that is an actual, if that is actually the reason, or it is, like I said, other reasons that are simply not stated.
Right. So do you think it's a legitimate reason, given that, you know, also in United Nations there's veto power that exists? So at the end of the day, even in UN and even in Board of Peace, someone has that power.
No, so veto power is shared by all members of the Security Council. Here, it seems to be President Trump leading the show. I'm not sure, to the best of my understanding, the exact the exact structure of authority of the Peace Council has not been defined. So I don't know what other powers will be delegated to members of the Peace Board. I don't know, to be honest. The whole structure of the whole operation of the Peace Board, in my opinion, seems very nebulous, very unclear, because the rebuilding of Gaza, according to Prime Minister Netanyahu, is predicated upon de-arming Hamas. And if Hamas is the only way to disarm Hamas is with military force. So nobody at this point is talking about resuming the war, which is the only way to disarm Hamas. And yet they are talking about rebuilding Gaza, which makes no sense. It would basically bring us back to the starting point of October 6th, where Hamas controls a territory and builds it up as a garrison and amasses weapons and tunnels and all that. So the entire premise of the Peace Board, in my opinion, is unclear at best and shaky at worst.
With that, I'd like to thank Mr. Rosenman for joining us today and sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now we move on to UK. The British Foreign Secretary has called for the release of Hong Kong tycoon and British national Jimmy Lai on humanitarian grounds. Lai was sentenced to 20 years in prison, a term described by London as tantamount to a life sentence. The Foreign Secretary has pledged further engagement with Hong Kong authorities over his case. Now we move on to Japan. Japan's Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi has secured a major victory in Sunday's lower house election, with her ruling Liberal Democratic Party winning 352 seats. Takaichi has thanked voters for their support and emphasized her focus on fiscal policy. Global leaders have quickly congratulated Takaichi on her win. U.S. President Donald Trump praised her leadership, calling her highly respected and very popular. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has expressed confidence in strengthening India-Japan partnership under Takaichi's leadership. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has also offered their congratulations, highlighting the strong international ties Japan continues to build under Takaichi. Now we move on to India and Canada. India and Canada have agreed on a security and law enforcement work plan following National Security Advisor Ajit Doval's visit to Ottawa. The agreement aims to strengthen cooperation between the two countries on issues including terrorism, organized crime, and transnational threats. Officials say the talks also covered intelligence sharing and mechanisms to improve coordination between law enforcement agencies. The move comes amid efforts by both sides to reset ties and address security concerns through structured dialogue. More details are expected as the work plan is implemented. Now for this, we welcome back Ms. Shruti Dasgupta. She's joining us from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Ms. Dasgupta, for staying with us. Now looking at, the warming up of the ties between India and Canada, what do you think are high on their agenda, as they share many things that led to the disruption in their ties earlier?
Yeah, we hit rock bottom under Trudeau's rule, and there was heavy political finger pointing happening without any credible evidence presented. There was just a whole lot of noise in it, which led to definite decoupling as two diplomatic nations. So now under Carney, we are rebuilding those bridges, and I believe this particular arrangement that they have come to detaches security arrangement from political finger pointing that it has been happening in the past. So now this is going to be a direct agency to agency cooperation, which will help. There'll be a liaison officer which is going to be assigned, and that's going to help better translation of objectives, better translation of hopes between the two agencies, better cooperation that's going to happen. There is going to be a joint action plan on the transnational crime that they keep talking about. The concerns are going to have a specific work plan and how they're going to tackle the organized crime that seems to be, if not originating in India, it's definitely originating in Canada, and verified information sharing. So this is something which is important, Because if you remember, India has forever claimed that there are 26 extradition requests that are pending in Canada, that India has sent to Canada of criminals that have taken refuge there, and Canada has just simply ignored it. Some of these extradition requests are just active for a decade. So if verified information is shared, warnings are given, and actionable intelligence is shared via Indian intelligence to Canada or via Canadian intelligence to India, it can help reset the security concerns that rocks both these two nations. Also, there is a larger immigration fraud that tends to happen in Canada. People claim, a false identity. We've known a few of those extradition requests are related to that. People who have committed crime in India have presented false identity, migrated, and there they have taken on Canadian citizenship and refuge, and then it becomes an international adventure rather than possible cooperation between two agencies. So that immigration fraud crackdown is very much important to the future of security of these two nations. So there is definitely a depoliticization of the relationship in terms of security arrangements, as well as, and this is important for me, depoliticization of extremist elements. That is, for me, that would mean the Khalistani elements, the jihadist elements that have taken refuge in Canada from India, that have gone there, or gone from other nations and become part of these groups that do not work in India's favor. That these are elements that I see would ensure that there is the trust deficit that had increased exponentially is kind of reduced, and the two nations are able to work together via building this bridge slowly, brick by brick, stone by stone.
So how do you think, this rift that was created during Trudeau's timing, including all the issues you mentioned, like the Khalistani, the international, the students' issues, and also I remember there was just some gang violence that both of them blamed each other for. All of this, as you mentioned, there are some pending issues. 23, I think you mentioned 23 issues that are pending in Canada's side. Do you think it's soon, or is it too late for them to start working on these, or do you think that it's okay that even if they start now under new leadership, under Carney's leadership and under Prime Minister Modi, they can work it out?
Well, I do hope that they can work it out. It's never too late to begin something like this, because those gangs don't vanish just because Trudeau's changed powers. Just because Trudeau is not in power, but the same party is in power, do you think they would have found no succor there? I'm sure there are elements that are working there. There are gang violence is one of the very major reasons. I believe the Niger killing, which was the pinnacle of all of this, on which the entire decoupling, the entire spiral down of diplomatic relations pivots on, is the Niger killing, and that was in itself was a gang violence. And the two people that were arrested by Canadian police are Sikhs, but they're Canadian residents. And India had sent information regarding those people, that these are gang members, these are criminals, and they are wanted, including Niger himself. So there is a huge chasm that they have to walk out of. But let's start one by one. Let's hope that once they begin this cooperation, there is an exchange happening. The Canadian security agencies would realize that these gang members that have taken control of their society, some of them have taken control of bigger criminal gangs and networks and nexuses. They are harmful for the Canadian society themselves. So I'm sure they would end up in jail one way or the other if this cooperation goes forth, as we hope it does. Yes. Is it late? Yes, because some of them have association with political parties. Some of them have political parties as fronting them. Yes. And their movements and their aspirations. So it's going to be difficult, but not impossible. It's never too late to do the right thing. And I hope that India and Canada reaching the security arrangement is just the beginning. Yes. Of the downfall of such elements in Canada as well as India.
Yes. Thank you for sharing such important message with us, Ms. Dasgupta. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Portugal. Moderate socialist Antonio José Seguro has secured a decisive victory in Portugal's presidential runoff, defeating his far-right rival André Ventura. With nearly 95% of the votes counted, Seguro has garnered 66% of the vote. That gives him a comfortable lead over Ventura's 34%. This victory marks the return of a socialist head of state after 20 years succeeding the conservative Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, who'd served 2 terms. Now socialist leader Seguro had gained backing from conservative figures after the first round due to concerns about Ventura's populist authoritarian tendencies. After the results, he has addressed the media and called for unity and expressed his deep humility and confidence in the role. Let's listen in.
Uma palavra para o meu adversário na segunda volta das presidenciais. Como várias vezes o disse, como democrata, todos os que concorreram comigo neste processo eleitoral merecem o meu respeito. Como futuro Presidente da República, acrescento que a partir desta noite deixamos de ser adversários e temos agora o dever partilhado de trabalhar por um Portugal mais desenvolvido e mais.
While Seguro's victory is clear, André Ventura's performance represents a significant achievement for his far-right Chega party, which has secured much stronger support than in last year's general election. Let's listen into what he has shared on the results.
Pensemos, e isso deve significar, como sempre foi, o reconhecer de que temos que fazer mais e de que temos que trabalhar mais para convencer todos de que a mudança faz falta. Mas mesmo não vencendo, este movimento, este partido, esta força, teve o seu melhor resultado de sempre na nossa história. Com uma grande parte do país, da Europa e do mundo contra nós, com Bruxelas contra nós, com todos contra nós, conseguimos ainda assim o melhor resultado de sempre. Não vencemos, mas estamos no caminho dessa vitória.
Now we move on. U.S. President Donald Trump has sent a message of the support to American cricket team competing in the ICC Men's T20 World Cup in India. Trump has praised Team USA as very strong and said the entire country is rooting for their success on the global stage. U.S. Ambassador to India Sergio Gore has thanked the president, highlighting both diplomatic and sporting enthusiasm around the tournament. Led by Monank Patel, the U.S. squad is featuring in its second T20 World Cup and includes many players of Indian origin. The team has steadily gained attention despite cricket being a growing sport in the United States. Now we move on to Olympics. U.S. ski legend Lindsey Vonn has undergone surgery after a horrific crash at the Milano Cortina Olympics. Vonn, 41, was attempting to compete with a ruptured knee ligament when she lost control just 13 seconds into the women's downhill. She was airlifted to a hospital in Treviso, where doctors stabilized a broken leg. Officials confirm her life is not in danger. Fellow American Breezy Johnson won the event, but teammates and spectators were left shocked by the dramatic accident. IOC and ski officials have praised Vonn's courage, calling her an inspiration, while wishing her a speedy recovery. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.